welcome to the Actual Tech Media EcoCast. Today's topic is endpoint management and protection tools. So I want to start by saying a big thank you for joining us on the EcoCast today. We've got some of the most innovative leading companies in the industry. You'll be hearing from experts at Sophos, Huntress, and CyberArk. It's a lot of different sessions full of innovative solutions, hot trends, and creative strategies all in one place, so settle in and get ready to learn. In order for you to get the most out of your day today, I'm going to cover a few housekeeping details. Of course, we do have some of these awesome prizes lined up for you, and I'll get back to those in just a moment. But first, I want to draw your attention to the questions box in your webinar control panel. If you haven't already said hi, there is a big audience out there today, and so many of your industry colleagues and peers are gathered together for this EcoCast. So reach out, give a wave to the other members of the Actual Tech Media community. We also want this to be an informative event for you, which means we want to see those technical questions. So throughout today's EcoCast, we hope you'll get engaged and make sure to ask all the questions that you have about the solutions and strategies that we'll be exploring together. Now, not only will we have team members responding to you during the live event, we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of each presentation. So if we don't get to your questions during the live event, don't worry, the subject matter experts from Sophos, Huntress, and CyberArk will be following up with you afterwards. Now, we all know that good things should be shared, so today on the EcoCast, when you hear something awesome or exciting, be sure to share it with your friends. You can use the Twitter button right there in your audience console, and the hashtag for today's EcoCast will automatically be added to your post. And while you're exploring that audience console, make sure to check out the Handout tab, where you'll find some fantastic resources and takeaways from our speakers here today. We've got an awesome collection of items today, including an active adversary playbook, an invite to cybersecurity training for IT pros, and a buyer's guide for managing endpoint privileges, and more. So click around in that handout section and download some of those incredible resources. But for those of you I haven't met yet, my name is Scott Becker with Actual Tech Media, and I'm one of the three main moderators for ATM webinars. So I'm excited to be your moderator for this exciting webcast today. As always, it's not just awesome content that we're giving away today. We have fantastic prizes too. So let me walk you through our incredible lineup of prizes today. You could win one of 3 Amazon gift cards worth $500 each. So we're getting up into the into the holiday season. It's always handy to have a little extra cash in your pocket. So I wish I was eligible for one of those. Now, as a reminder, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prizes, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. So if you're not sure what those are, you can find the full T's and C's in the Handouts tab. Again, just click into that Handouts section of your audience console and scroll down to the bottom. You'll find it there. So we'll follow up with all the winners after the event. And again, if you have any questions about whether or not you're eligible to win any of the prizes today, just check out those terms and conditions in the Handouts tab. And just a few quick reminders on the slide here, including that all of the $500 card winners are required to submit an IRS Form W-9 to Actual Tech Media. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that question section of your audience console is great for posting feedback. Also, by the way, any technical issues that might come up today, just a quick reminder there that a browser refresh will fix just about any issues with slides, audio, or video. But if not, throw a comment in the question section and our crew will be there to help. That said, the absolute most important thing to remember is how we love getting all of your insightful questions during these events. Your questions really drive these events. They make them what they are. And your questions tailor the events to what you want to know, what you need to know. So we have a special additional prize for all of you folks out there. In today's EcoCast, we'll be giving away a $50 Amazon gift card to the best question asked in each of our live sessions. That's all 3 sessions, so 3 gift cards to give away there. So the teams will review all of the questions asked after the event, which means even if your question does not get read out in a live session, there's still a chance to win. And if you are a winner here today, you always have the option to donate the value of the prize to one of our selected charities. Thanks to generous prize winners on previous Actual Tech Media events, thousands of dollars have been donated to these wonderful charities. So if you're a lucky winner and you would like to get involved with one of these amazing organizations, just let us know. We'd love to help you make that happen. And again, we're so happy to have you all here at the live event today, and we want to keep that good feeling going. So let's connect on social. First, use that Twitter button that we chatted about earlier. It will add the hashtag for today's event as you share all the exciting things that you're learning. And if you're looking for more awesome content after the EcoCast today, make sure to subscribe to Actual Tech Media on YouTube. And next, make sure to connect with Actual Tech Media on Twitter and Facebook. We want to hear from you. And while you're exploring, we also have some great content for you on LinkedIn. So make sure to reach out and connect with us there. And speaking of great content, if you haven't already checked out the Actual Tech Media Guerrilla Guide Book Club, now is the time. The Guerrilla Guide Book Club gives you access to free enterprise IT books written by top industry experts. So you can stay up to date on trending enterprise technology. And yes, these books will work on your Kindle or mobile device, and they're all completely free. So you can download these information-packed resources at guerrilla.guide.com, and there's a link in the Handouts tab for you as well. And actually, we went through a lot of prizes earlier, but we've got one more way to win a prize, and that's to refer an industry friend or coworker to the Actual Tech Media event series. So you'll find a link to do that right in your Handouts tab, and you'll be automatically redirected at the end of the event as well. And we promise not to spam your friends and coworkers. We'll send them an invitation to a list of upcoming events, and if they don't respond, they'll only get one more reminder from us. So both you and your coworker could win a $300 Amazon gift card. And we hold those drawings every month, so be sure to refer a friend because it could quite literally be a win-win situation. Okay, so we've covered a lot of really important things already. Let's get into the reason for this EcoCast, and that is endpoint management and protection. So we are talking about endpoints today. They're the devices that your users physically touch to do their jobs. They can be desktops, laptops, tablets, terminals, smartphones, printers, and other devices. All those devices have one thing in common, and it's that those are some of the easiest corporate resources to compromise or spoof to get into more valuable corporate resources. When attackers do break in, it can be bad in several ways. Productivity obviously suffers when the devices are bricked by an attack or when they're locked down for a security emergency. And the data can be compromised from endpoints that can then pose a competitive, financial, or compliance risk. Finally, the endpoints can serve as a jumping off point for the attacker into the rest of the organization's assets. And of course, security isn't the only issue. The proliferation of devices means effective tools for management of endpoints can save the IT department time, money, and effort. So protecting and managing those endpoints is what we're going to focus on today. We'll be picking up some best practices for getting endpoints under control. We'll be learning about the latest attack techniques targeting endpoints and how to defeat the bad actors. And we'll be discovering innovative tools for managing and protecting endpoints. And then, of course, we'll be posing your questions to our expert presenters. So in order to set the stage for the solutions you'll be hearing about today, let's look at a few simple truths about endpoints. So endpoints are little. I mean, how big a problem can a little endpoint be? Just, a little smartphone, a little laptop, the data is all in the servers, right? Well, obviously not, and if you're here today, you know that. First off, their footprint is massive. So let's flip that around. Much of the world's data is in cloud data centers, with much of the rest of it on, in on-premises data centers. But there are way more endpoints to protect than data centers. And the data centers, you protect one pipe, into the data center. Lots of ports, but one place. With the devices, there's as many entrees into the corporate resource as there are devices out there. So what's more is that footprint is becoming more diffuse. With remote work, a lot of these endpoints are spread around. Even official corporate assets like company laptops may never have come into the IT shop for configuration. Think about it. How many employees get onboarded by receiving a laptop shipped directly to them by Dell or Apple? And then complicating that is a lot of the equipment IT is dealing with now wasn't even chosen by the IT department. BYOD has become a norm, and with employees at home, a lot of their supplemental devices as well are not tracked or necessarily known about by the IT department. So, examples would be mobile phones, tablets, printers, other PCs that they're using, or, their networking equipment, the router from the cable company, and the Wi-Fi devices. So, it's a lot of stuff out there with, sort of non-traditional IT control over that equipment. So for all those reasons, endpoint security is a big deal. And that leads us to the fact that the endpoint threat is huge and growing. You'll hear a lot more about specific attacks in the upcoming sessions. But for now, let's look at some of the big picture statistics. So 68% of organizations have experienced an attack. So according to a study by the Ponemon Institute, 68% of organizations have experienced one or more endpoint attacks, successfully compromised data, and or their IT infrastructure. So, that's a ton of organizations. It's obviously a huge vector. Ransomware is obviously one of the most prevalent forms of malware. We host webinars on ransomware all the time at Actual Tech Media. In fact, we've got one of our expert series sessions tomorrow with ransomware expert Alan Liska. But according to research from Sophos, ransomware is most likely to enter an organization via file download or an email with a malicious link. So that was 29% of the instances where ransomware entered an organization. It came through that vector. And then emails with malicious attachments as opposed to malicious links account for another 16% of ransomware entries. So endpoints are incredibly important to your overall ransomware defense strategy. Meanwhile, the cost of successful endpoint attack is high. Another Ponemon Institute study put it at $8.94 million, nearly $9 million. And that was a couple of years ago, so with inflation, that is probably higher now. So we'll be hearing about solutions to these problems today. Enterprises are certainly responding, and I want to share a few data points from Gartner. These are recent strategic planning assumptions that the analyst firm is using. And the first one has to do with cloud-delivered endpoint protection platforms, or EPPs. So Gartner says that by the end of 2023, the end of next year, cloud-delivered EPP solutions will exceed 95% of deployment. So cloud is becoming the place to be for an endpoint protection platform. And the next point has to do with endpoint detection and response, or EDR, which you'll be hearing a bit about today. Gartner says that by 2025, 50% of organizations using EDR will use managed detection and response capability. And finally, one more point on EDR. Gartner's projecting that by 2025, 60% of EDR solutions will include data from multiple security control sources. So when they talk about multiple security control sources, they're referring to things like identity, cloud access security brokers, and data loss prevention. So I guess I'd say congratulations for being here today. You're positioning yourself for where the puck is going to be over the next few years. Now, before we get to our first session of the day, we do have a quick poll question for you, and that's, what is your time frame for adding new or updating existing IT solutions at your company, including, of course, endpoint management and protection tools? So we'll just leave that poll up there for a minute, give everybody an opportunity to respond to that one. See the responses rolling in. We do really appreciate everyone's responses on this question. Okay, and we'll Thanks, everybody. It looks like the responses are starting to slow down, so thank you for those of you who did respond. We really appreciate it. Okay, so let's get rolling with our sessions. Now it's time for our first presentation in the Endpoint Management and Protection Tools EcoCast, and this session comes from Sophos. So presenting for Sophos is Matt Hickey, who is Senior Director of Sales Engineering. Now I will turn things over to Matt.
Session's topic is Sophos Endpoint, delivering better security solutions for real-world organizations. So let's take a look at what a typical attack looks like. It will take you through that whole process, from initial access to privilege escalations to lateral movement, as well as the impact on a network itself. So when we first talk about initial access, there are three primary methods: exposed vulnerabilities, valid credentials, and malicious email attachments. 50% of the time, the attacks involve taking advantage of a known vulnerability. We are seeing still, this hasn't changed, is that on average, it's about 180 days until a vulnerable server is patched. In addition, credential theft remains a problem. The reuse of credentials, LinkedIn credentials specifically, test user login info. Web browser cookies being stolen to bypass multi-factor authentication are used to reset passwords. And criminal groups we call access brokers are now selling credentials on the dark web. Commonly exposed services, there are over 20,000 vulnerabilities discovered in 2021. The most common exploited in mass were the proxy logon and proxy shell variety. Most widely deployed applications, so they become a big target for our adversaries. Of course, during the pandemic, the attacks moved to where the users were too. We saw a quick uptick against remote access solutions. So how many companies out there pivoted to this remote access strategy too fast without really addressing the security needs as well? I've been saying this for too long. It's been my mantra: is do not extend your network just to extend your vulnerabilities. We're still seeing email is still the primary vector for attacks, but it's taking different forms. Bumblebee is the newest player on the board. It appears to be closely related to the Conti group. They have gotten very clever with their ultimate goal is to still launch malicious code. It's not very complex code. It's just enough to gather the minimum information, contact a command and control server on the internet to download additional code that will perform a targeted attack. We've been seeing Cobalt Strike artifacts involved with the majority of the breaches by our rapid response team. If you have the proper tools in place today, you should go back and look at these types of artifacts. Cobalt artifacts generally means that you probably have something going on within your network. Also, what we've seen for persistence is web shells is a popular tool. So patches don't always get rid of existing web shells. Attackers scour the internet for these available servers and quickly deploy this type of persistence attack and hid in an Outlook web access subfolder. So even after you patch and rebooted, they maintain persistence. And the reason why is that these web shells, tended to be vulnerable because a lot of smaller networks that were internet facing still used Outlook web access, but also it took more than just a patch to clean up this vulnerability. It would actually a two-step process, and a lot of people didn't realize that or didn't do the proper maintenance on their servers. So the second phase here is the privilege escalation. So once I have access to your network, now what I want to do is actually escalate my privileges. So let's take a look at how that is happening. So most often initial compromise occurs using an account that doesn't have enough privilege to cause serious damage. Privilege escalation is number one goal after initial breach. If accomplished by an initial access broker, it can increase the market price of selling this victim on to other criminals. Active Directory defaults are quite porous and leave plenty of opportunity for a misconfiguration. Many, so just keep that in mind as well. Example for getting access to it is actually doing recon on your Active Directory. Another thing too is that once they're on your network, they're trying to escalate privileges, but they also want to obfuscate what they're doing. So before you begin to exploit a network, it is best to make sure your tools and scripts and behaviors will go undetected. Many PowerShell, JavaScript, Python payloads will simply be heavily obfuscated. So although you can sign a malicious, in malicious code in and out, obfuscation is nothing new and is common in Windows portable executable binaries. Frameworks like Metasploit, Veil, and Cobalt Strike all rely upon binary obfuscation as a technique to evade endpoint detection. Considering the attackers have already likely elevated their privilege to administration or higher, they now hold the keys to the kingdom. As an administrator, it is virtually guaranteed you can disable security products, especially those who are managed on-premise or those without multi-factor authentications. This is one of the reasons why Sophos really encouraged all your administrative tools to have multi-factor authentication enabled. We can't tell you how many times we've seen a network administrator's credentials be compromised, and then what the first thing they do is they turn off all the security protection on that network. Credential access, is just a fancy way of saying computer ID theft. We all know that passwords need to die, and we all know that it's not going to happen anytime soon. Sadly, credential access plays a part in a significant number of attacks. We observe everything from stolen passwords from LinkedIn's 2012 password breach is still valid on corporate domains today. We've actually seen a company using that 2012 password database on their existing Active Directory passwords, and they found that people are still using their passwords from 2012. So that's pretty amazing. So human choice of passwords have always been a weak spot for password guessing, as well as dramatically more sophisticated phishing scams designed to volunteer victims into providing access to the most sensitive information. So we talked about getting access, getting persistent. We talked about how they escalate privileges. Now what happens is discovery and lateral movement. So discovery, is really like trying to find a needle in haystack. Once you gain access and gain admin, you remove the defensive barriers over time. Now you want to find the loot. In general, most adversaries use living off the land techniques to discover valuable assets. Now, people have probably talked about living off the land techniques. This means they either use existing tools that are allowed and are used by administrators of the network, or they bring along tools that are not considered malware, but in the wrong hands, help the attackers discover things to take advantage of. The order of these steps can vary as often as the discovery step may come before privilege escalation, as the discovery step can be used to find unpatched or unmaintained assets to gain easily access rights. So we had a lot of cases where people were taking those terminal servers that were internet facing, they put them in a DMZ and they still unpatched them. So once a person got access to the network, they found those vulnerable resources. That's a great reason to implement an application control alongside strict change control windows. Any of these tools by non-approved staff or outside of maintenance hours should be considered a breach and immediately investigated. While something as simple as a single PC becoming compromised can totally change your risk profile in a traditionally boundary-defined networks. In this example, a user has installed a TeamViewer and is using the same password that was used on another site that had a password breach. This gives the adversary a foothold. Now they can attack internal assets that may not have had the same priority for patching or externally facing servers finding somewhere they can successfully exploit, like SolarWinds in the example here. On that system, as it is a server, there's a high likelihood of administrative credentials have been present, and the criminals are now able to leverage those tools to steal administrative credentials. Several commercial tools are widely abused to help with lateral movement, as well as some other activities noted in that we've already talked about. Far and away, the most common use is Cobalt Strike. However, there's many other tools that for the use people use for penetration testing, like Metasploit. We found RDP, or remote desktop protocol, 85% is still the #1 tool used for internal lateral movement. So something to keep in mind. So the next thing is that what happens once they gain access to your network? So it really depends. Attackers, especially ransomware attackers, are looking for folders, files they can steal. This is why dwell time, the time from initial compromise until data is stolen or malware is detonated, is so important. The less time for the criminals to root around and find the right documents, the less damage will your information and reputation. This is why the volume of the exfiltration doesn't really matter. It's the right files being stolen. You only need a few of them. So take a look at some of the things they're using here. Is that there are many methods for exfiltration, for data exfiltration. The popular open source tool called rclone is used to mass copy archive files to a cloud storage service. rclone works a lot like rsync or xcopy, except you could use a cloud storage provider as a source or destination. It supports a large number of popular services like Dropbox or even Amazon S3. So looking into the data collected from our rapid response service, criminals nearly always use like a mega.io as a preferred destination for stolen data. In a well-monitored network, this activity should stick out like a sore thumb. Hundreds of gigabytes, sometimes terabytes, being uploaded to an unknown server like a mega server, typically serving interactive applications. This does not require that you know what normal looks like, but you have the ability to monitor, though. Best practice is to block all file sharing that aren't in use at your organization and block entirely from DMZ and server accounts. The impacts of this organization are enormous from data breaches. In our recent report, the State of Ransomware 2022, we noted that the average cost of a ransomware incident in 2022 was $1.4 million, and organizations were crippled for a month on average. Our experience shows that the sooner an incident is discovered, the lower the cost of recovery. Organizations with disaster response plans and business continuity plans almost always have faster recovery and incident costs. So let's put this all together. And what I want to show you right now is, again, something we're going to provide at the end of the presentation to download, but this comes right from the front lines. So the following we're going to talk about is a $15 million ransomware that is taken right from one of our casebooks. So this casebook highlights how agile and adaptable human-operated attackers can be. So we're going to take you right from day 0 all the way through day 30, what this looks like. So on day 0, prior to the attack becoming active, the operators compromised a computer on the target's network. This computer was then used as what was known as a beachhead on the network. On multiple occasions during the attack, the attackers connected from here to other computers over remote desktop protocol. Most likely using a tool like Shodan, they found the vulnerable internet-facing systems. So when we talk about day 1 to 3, the attack begins. On day 3, the main part of the attack began. The attackers exploited a domain admin account with a weak password to take control of an unprotected domain controller. They then spent several days, we're talking about that dwell time, moving across the network. They even used a legitimate scanning tool called an advanced IP scanner to map the entire network. The attackers then created a list of IP addresses in which they would later deploy ransomware. This included a list of IP addresses of machines belonging to the target's IT administrators. The attackers' attention then turned to the exfiltration of data. They identified a file server and accessed it remotely over RDP using the compromised domain admin account. Using legitimate archiving tools like WinRAR or 7-zip, they started compressing folders located in it and then used an FTP client to send that data offsite. What was obvious too, the attackers tried to install a cloud storage application, Mega, on the domain controller. This was blocked as the target had added Mega to their block list and using the application. So this is the idea of providing additional protection to that endpoint, and we were able to block that as well. If we take a look, at day 5, is things that typically happen is we discovered is that a lot of attacks really occur on the weekends, and they do this because they know no one's watching the network. So if you take a look at day 5, ransomware was deployed to 700 devices and with a $15 million ransomware. This was all blocked by our endpoint. So we had that advanced protection there, so we were able to block this. But now, as I said before, is that we have to go endpoint has to go far beyond just stopping malicious files and we have to stop malicious applications, but we also have to give you the capability to go back and investigate that. And that's really what happens after we discovered this and blocked that attempted attack. We now have the capability now to go back. So the first ransomware attack was launched on a Sunday using that already compromised domain account and a list of IP addresses that it used using that scanner. The first attack actually comprised of 3 attacks as the operators deployed 3 copies of the ransomware via batch scripts. So this is when we came into play is that our rapid response team quickly came to work, realizing that they were under attack. The target security team engaged our team. And since they were deployed our solution, we actually had a lot of visibility with what was going on. The team quickly identified the compromised admin account, identified and removed several malicious files, and blocked the attacker commands access to command and control communications. Day 8, over the following hours, our team found further tools and techniques used by the attackers, as well as evidence relating to the exfiltration of data. More files and accounts were blocked as well. So what just happened too is that once the attackers found out that they were being actively targeted, so no longer can you, I think it's like an automated script, we actually had hands on keyboard blocking them. They now became really desperate, and they started targeting a single machine with additional ransomware attacks. And in the third attempt, they actually changed their techniques and distributed ransomware payloads inside a virtual machine. Fortunately, we had hands on keyboards, and we were actively stopping these changing of techniques. So we recognized this approach, and immediately, as they also responded to the additional ransomware attacks. So what was interesting here is that during this whole attack, this 9-day process, it was more than just an automated attack. It was actually the attacker had hands on keyboards, and then once we discovered it, we were able to take dynamic action on that as well. So I just want to show you kind of the real world example of what we talked about previously with that advanced attack where they take all those steps from an attack itself. So what I want to do is provide a way that, the legacy approaches that we had before for endpoint security really doesn't doesn't really isn't really effective against the kind of these latest trends that are out there. So in the shifting environment, many customers tell us that the legacy approaches to cybersecurity are resulting in poor security outcome. Some of the most common issues we hear are, first of all, is really lack of integration. Security tools don't integrate with each other or a wider IT infrastructure. It's increasingly complex. For example, we recently surveyed 1,600 IT directors on what influences their choice of vendor for IT security solutions. And number one has been lack of integration. Next, manual processes. IT teams spend valuable hours correlating events, logs, and information to understand what is happening. Customers have consistently told us that prior to using Defensivation, up to half the team's time will be spent correlating data across systems to see what's going on. Next is the shortage of skills. IT skills continue to be hard to recruit into business. So the people you do have are stretched too thin. And in that same survey, 81% of IT pros said their ability to find and retain skilled IT security professionals is a major challenge to their ability to deliver IT security. And 27% say it's their single biggest challenge. And once people start deploying multiple different security solutions in that layered security approach, what they get is noise overload. IT security teams get so many alerts, it's overwhelming them. It's what's known as alert fatigue. They struggle to see the needles because the haystack keeps growing. And again, in that same survey, the team's cybersecurity workload has increased over the last year. So that the more increased, less staff, you see the problem there as well. So a lot of organizations too are on their back foot. They're taking a reactive response. IT teams are on the back foot responding to threats once they're hit rather than stopping them earlier in the attack chain. As we just saw, over 1/3 of the organizations experienced a ransomware attack last year, with cyber criminals succeeding in encrypting data in 54% of those incidents. You want to be stopping the attack, not figuring out how to restore your data. And also too, is that from a user perspective, and we've seen this too, is that we have multiple access needs. I mean, users are everywhere. Data is everywhere, on-prem, in the cloud, on devices, accessed via remote access solutions, meaning you need to cover all these scenarios. You don't need me to tell you about home and remote working as we're living it. No longer is an option. It's probably your first option now for a lot of your employees that are out there. On the cloud front, again, from that same survey, we're seeing that more and more people are moving workloads to that cloud infrastructure. And if not, it's a top priority and probably on your list as well. And we're seeing too is distributed users. The remote flexible working was already a trend, but it's hugely accelerated now. And the legacy remote access tools are simply not designed for today's high level of remote access, remote working. So we're also too is that we're seeing a shifting control. Teams are increasingly deploying solutions and services outside of IT. For example, software as a service tools for HR and marketing and development tools, meaning that there are a lot of areas that require cybersecurity that IT doesn't control. So that leads us, to ask all this investment, all this effort, have we really improved our security outcomes? Well, this is how Sophos can provide that additional protection for you to improve your security outcome with our endpoint solution. So what we first want to do is optimize our prevention. So what first thing you have to do is when you're optimizing your prevention, you want to reduce that attack surface. Okay, that means blocking potential unwanted applications, blocking malicious or suspect websites used by content filtering, controlling what applications are allowed to run. Like, why does PowerShell enable carte blanche throughout your organization? That should only be run by administrators and heavily observed from there as well. Controlling what devices are allowed and not allowed within the organization, whether it be Android devices, iOS devices, what laptops are allowed as well, and also locking down your server configurations. Okay, you're only allowing, if I have a dedicated server in my environment and it runs a specific application, let's lock it down to just run that application. But what we also want to do is prevent attacks from running. We want to use a layered protection techniques to stop both the threats and the attacks. That includes, AI-based behavior prevention. That leveraging, a behavior-based ransomware technology, and also, exploit prevention that stops the techniques the attackers are using and protecting against the attacks that leverage previously unknown vulnerabilities. We saw this last year in the Kaseya attack. It's a prime example of the importance of prevention. By the time the attack was detected, it was too late and the files were encrypted. I'm proud, we have the capability with this layered approach that we can stop those from happening, and we have specifically designed protection against ransomware as well. So what does that look like, when we take a look at, that attack kill chain? First of all, we're stopping it pre-breach, and that's what we want to do, with web control, web protection. We also want to stop it, the exploitations by doing local privilege mitigation, application lockdown. But also that post-breach protection, pre-execution behavior, leveraging artificial intelligence, server lockdown that for your servers, making sure they only run the specific applications they're designed for. And then also too is taking a look at data loss prevention, from a post breach, and making sure you're protecting your clients, from the worst case. I said before, the ransomware is the last thing an intruder or attacker will do on your network, and being able to stop that as well is very important. But the key to actually providing this prevention is minimizing the time to detection, because we talked about that alert overload. So what we want to do, first of all, is stopping, all of the attacks. Every second counts when an adversary is in your environment. Yet all too often, defenders are slowed down by an overwhelming volume of alerts, limited visibility, a lack of insight, or slower manual process. That's why our endpoint approach is optimized prevention. Minimize the time to detect. So you're not looking at all of the attacks. You're only looking at the most important. The more you keep out and the less you have to detect and respond to. This enables you to focus your efforts, more accurate detections. Go straight to the needle rather than digging through the haystack. To show what I mean, the stats I'm showing you are shared from our Sophos Managed Threat Response team in our Managed Detection and Response service, which today has more than 8,000 customers. We have a medium time to detect of less than 1 minute. Our medium time to investigate is 25 minutes, and we continue to lower that as well. Our experts are able to leverage the collective insights and expertise of Sophos Labs and Sophos AI to gain the context we need to guide their investigations. And our MTTR is just 12 minutes, so it's mean time to respond. So our total response time is just 38 minutes on average, and that's getting lower and lower as we get better and better intelligence from these attacks that are out there as well. Then that's a big advantage of actually leveraging Sophos, because we have all this data from Sophos Labs and everything we've done and built up over time, all of the processes as well. Let's talk a little bit about our MTR and our threat detection and response methodology. So there are 5 key components to threat detection and response. The first is prevention. We want to prevent adversaries from being able to penetrate a network in the first place. Properly configured technology, prompt patching, and tight access control reduces your attack surface, with robust prevention minimizing the number of security alerts and events that need to be investigated. That means there is less noise, more signals, and more time to perform analysis. Collection. We need to gather all the data needed to be able to find the threats. We don't want to just hover on old data. We need the right type of data that is useful for investigating threats with enough volume and coverage and a decent quality to capture the time or cadence that's necessary. Some data you need every few minutes, some every few hours. There's no point capturing every window event log if it's missing any IDs to essentially identify each adversarial activity. Prioritization. Being a security analyst is hard work, and it's important to avoid information overload. We talked about, alert fatigue. Too many signals, and it's impossible to review them all. We need to pinpoint the signals that matter. So to do this, we improve signal-to-noise ratio using context around events, leveraging AI models, industry intel, and really our experience with doing this from 35 years. Sophos Labs has been doing this for 35 years, and this is really what's behind a lot of the intelligence we're gathering and providing protection for our customers as well. Very unique in the space, the fact that we have solutions across the threat surface, whether it be firewall, email, endpoint. And now we have the capability to gather that telemetry to find out all the threats that are out there and providing our protection for our customers. Action. So basically here is the investigation. Any insight to signals, measuring against industry standard frameworks, make verdicts, find related events, the key steps an adversary took to achieve the objective. So providing that information as well. So as I said before in the beginning, is that no longer is it just about stopping attacks or stopping applications. Now it's actually identifying, okay, we stopped this attack. Now let's take a look at everything it did in its process. So first of all, let's, as we talked before, we want to minimize the time to detect. So let's imagine a scenario where an attacker had managed to infiltrate your organization through an unprotected device. Now that they have a foothold, every second counts. Their goal is to run as silently and remain unnoticed as long as possible as they attempt to raise their privileges. So we do this protection in an effective way. So first of all, we have multi-vector machine learning and threat intelligence that provide AI prioritized risk score for each detection. This is all at your display within the console. The score ranges from 0 to 10, with 0 being non-determined, 1 to 3 being low risk, and then all the way up to 10 being the highest risk. These scores are color-coded, so your security analyst can be alerted to that as well. And we map everything to that MITRE framework that we talked about earlier. If an analyst wants to look into a detection, we give them contextual information at their fingertips. Operators can access valuable insights such as the first and last time a detection was seen, a description of the detection, device geolocation. So we give you all the data points you need for being an analyst. So the analyst can actually then pivot to any of the data points to explore further. For example, the analyst could request a threat graph to see the visual step-by-step recreation of the detection, including processes, files, the registry keys that were touched, and more contextual information is not limited to that device. Analysts can look up a hash on a virus tool with a single click, or look at failed successful login attempts for a specific user. That's all at your fingertips. So what I also do is actually provide comprehensive and a collaborative type of approach. So armed with this detailed understanding of a detection, analysts can now dive deeper and create a case and perform a full investigation. If a detection is severe enough, the system will automatically correlate and include pertinent signal and detections with a case ready for analyst view. This provides a full picture of what's happening in the environment and saves valuable time for the analyst. From the case investigation dashboard, an analyst has an overview of every case, information as priority, a title, status, assigned analyst, so it allows you to collaborate too within your teams. So it's a very comprehensive approach. So response. So we have the capability to be both automated as well as analyst driven. So from the automated process, we can terminate the process, we'll quarantine files, we'll even do ransomware automatic rollback without any administrative intervention. So, and also for the analyst-led too, is that you have your security analyst, contextual pivots from detections, and also the capability to share that across your analysts and your SOC as well. So that's our presentation for today. Thank you very much for your time today.
Okay, thanks, Matt. Great presentation. Love that case study with the timeline. That's so valuable to see. So it looks like we're out of time for questions over the audio line in this session, but the Sophos team has been addressing some questions in the Q&A chat. Great conversations going on there, so check that out if you haven't seen it already. Meanwhile, we will make sure that the Sophos team sees any questions that we didn't get to there in the chat. And we do have this poll question for you. We appreciate your feedback on additional resources that you'd like to see from Sophos. So thanks to everybody who's responded to the poll already. We appreciate your feedback, and I'll just leave that up there for another moment, and then we'll move on to our next presentation. But I would also like to remind all of you about the handouts. We've got that Active Adversary Playbook 2022 up there from Sophos. That is a fantastic resource covering behaviors, tactics, and tools that Sophos saw on the front line of incident response in the previous year. So be sure to check that out if you'd like more detail. It's some of the some more detail on some of the situations that Matt discussed in his presentation. And while we leave that poll question up there, let's look at our first prize drawing. The winner of the first Amazon gift card worth $500 is Marcus Moran from Louisiana. So congratulations, Marcus. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. Okay, well, thanks again to Matt Hickey for that great presentation, and thanks so much for educating us on Sophos. And now it's time for our next presentation in the Endpoint EcoCast, and our next session comes from Huntress Labs. Presenting for Huntress is Dima Kumets, Principal Product Manager. Dima, welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I'll turn things over to you.
Sounds great. Well, hey, thanks everybody for joining. My name is Dima Kumets, as you just heard. And some of you might have heard about Huntress before, maybe from the company's discovery and published research of the Kaseya breach that happened over 4th of July last year, or our work on the SolarWinds breach, where we actually pulled it as an expert witness, or maybe from the blog, where you might have seen our postings on Log4j, like including the Vuln tester that we put out, or the Selena Zero Day. Company's been at the forefront of delivering on security for both industry knowledge and as practitioners. But I met the founders back at RSA 2016 when they were first coming out of the intelligence world and military contractor world where they've been working as offensive and defense cybersecurity practitioners and shared their vision for leveraging that expertise to build a cybersecurity company focused on really protection beyond the Fortune 100 and delivering cybersecurity to the companies that need it most. And their market hypothesis was that in mid-sized organizations as well as small business, like the big problems with cybersecurity are that the solutions out in the market are too damn expensive, generate too much noise, and there's too little expertise in the real world to manage all of those tools. Just curious, we're gonna do a quick poll to see if any or all of the above are still relevant for all of y'all. So you can just take a minute to respond to that. All right, well, thanks for the responders. Sounds like all of the above still tracks, although it seems like too much noise is picking up steam faster and faster. I totally get that and really appreciate everybody who's responded to that poll. Oh, and too expensive is also ramping up. Well, with that, I'm just going to jump ahead and talk a little bit more about Huntress. Well, we are a managed security platform, and managed being a keyword that focuses on protecting mid-sized and small business through simplicity, expertise, and community, and all this, of course, at a cost that makes sense. The proof is in the pudding, and really the company has since then ramped up significantly. We are protecting over 1.6 million endpoints today, have over 10,000 customers and partners, and a stat that I'm proud of, we are a 24/7, 365 organizations, which means we are able to crush those hackers' dreams while our customers and partners get to sleep and do their thing without worry. So let's talk a little bit about the endpoint security journey and really how we got here as an industry. So if we think about endpoint security, we all remember the days of installing McAfee or Norton or any of these other legacy AV providers with signatures that were getting updated. And of course, our adversaries also remember getting around them by injecting random data in their binaries and altering the hashes and signatures of their tools. However, still a table stakes offering, something that needs to be out there and used. And from there, we went on to next-gen antivirus. And this was where we got advanced prevention, behavioral detection, maybe got a little cloudy, maybe a little machine learning, but really that's sort of next-gen evolution of antivirus. And it's good, but when we look at the real-world scenario, we're now very much living in the EDR, endpoint detection and response world, because let's face it, we know that stuff is going to slip through even the best behavioral-based cloud, AI, etc. And now we're kind of at this place where cybersecurity insurance is requiring us to have this post-incident detection so that we can respond, contain the damage, and take a cybersecurity incident and turn it into something that is not a business impacting incident, but just a technology issue. But the challenge with this, locally managed, it can be noisy, it can be cumbersome, it's tough to identify what is the real problem that's going to potentially hurt you versus what's a small nuisance. And that's where managed EDR comes into play, which sounds great. Get humans to look at all of these alerts, separate the wheat from the chaff, do assisted response, remotely manage it. But back to that polling question, for most organizations, that has proved to be too damn expensive. And that's where Huntress comes in. We offer fully managed EDR with that 24/7 team at a price that most organizations can afford and a price that makes sense. So when we talk about how the company got there from a technology perspective, really remember that whole pedigree of the cybersecurity offensive and defensive professionals starting the company. Well, from their hacking days, they remember that the first thing that they wanted to do once they breached a system is make sure they can survive a reboot. You don't want to know that every patch Tuesday when a machine gets rebooted, you're going to all of a sudden lose access to that machine, and your ransomware isn't going to get a chance to make you money. Your Trojans aren't going to get to install their stuff. It's the persistent footholds that are really important. And so the company started off with, let's build a really, really, really good persistent threat foothold detection engine. And that's still the core of what we do. From there, it went, okay, well, you know, most machines come with, or all Windows boxes come with Defender on the machine. Let's just look for all those detections and send them to the human analysts so they can start using those as telltales. And then the latest deployment is really what I think is key to the EDR story, is process insights, which is let's see what processes are running on the system. And as soon as a new process gets launched, have those analysts be able to look at anything that looks suspicious and be able to respond. And this is where we see things like when Log4j came out, oops, VMware Horizon servers said they were fully patched. Turns out they weren't, and Tomcat was for some reason launching other software that were binary executables as opposed to just JavaScript, and that set off a lot of triggers. And from there, I think it was actually bad actors were using that to launch Cobalt Strike beacons, but that's where the team was able to respond in the middle of the night and shut those machines off from the internet and prevent major data breaches. I also said earlier that Huntress is a managed security platform. Of course, in addition to all the things that I talked about before, we also do have ransomware canaries and external recon as well as other technologies, but we're really focused in on really being that managed layer and being able to offer humans that look at those environment changes and just see all of those things as signals, and then analysts that review them, investigate, and give your team the incidents that are high priority and that have actionable insights, as opposed to having your people waste their time digging through and sifting through all the notes. In terms of biggest things that we see in the world out there, what I'm going to talk about in just a second are those suspicious PowerShell arguments. These are things that are happening in massive scale, and we've been responding to those in force. Of course, one other thing on here, you see that threat ops hunting is the second largest source of detections. Something I hadn't mentioned before, one of the other things that our analysts do is proactively go out and hunt for vulnerabilities and signs of infection. And again, this is all happening 24/7, 365. So while your team is off focusing on the next big business enabling shift, our folks are out hunting and finding new vulnerabilities in the systems. So let's talk about the real world and the carnage that ensues when you operate this kind of organization. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through both sides of the screen, both what the attacker is seeing and what the analyst is seeing. And just a couple of ground rules. So this is for myself, really, for this offensive cybersecurity demo. So not going to go on any super secret dark web hoodie and smoke machine type hunt to get these tools. I'm going to go for things that are user friendly and well documented. And as you're going to see, all this stuff is shockingly effective. Also shockingly easy to use. So first thing we're going to talk about are reverse shells. You're all familiar with getting a shell in a machine. We SSH in or tell that in if we're in the olden days. But that is something that we're all used to and something that really firewalls are very good at preventing. Reverse shells are the opposite. It's where the machine beacons out and opens the shell outbound, which firewalls are not so good at paying attention to. So let's start off by going to Kali Linux, which is a popular Linux distro, and just downloading that and installing that on a virtual machine. And then let's go on GitHub and download Hoax Shell. And Hoax Shell is pretty interesting. If you happen to have time later on today, suggest going on YouTube and watching my colleague John Hammond's video on it, where he talks through how it bypasses most next-gen AVs and successfully uses it to compromise his own machine to install Unicats on it. But here we go. We've got the hoax shell. We've got a virtual machine running Kali Linux. And while I would love to do this all live, none of you want to have me do that, because you'll be sitting here going, now let's wait a minute while all these things run. So I've got some screenshots of actually my colleague Josh and I running through this. So we start off by tricking the user into running a PowerShell command. That's all it takes. On the endpoint, that would take just a little blip on the screen, if anything, but I send them an attachment, I use some other form of compromise, and they get moving. So now after that happens, disappears, and we see in our Kali Linux box, hey, session started. Okay, great. And now you can see that we've got a PowerShell prompt, and we're able to do whatever we want. And what do you normally do? First thing, we run a who am I, we look at what's on the system, maybe move to desktop and confirm that, yep, those two shortcuts are the only things that we see on this fully patched Windows 10 Enterprise box. And we're off to the races. On the analyst side, what they would be seeing is that process insights alert that there have been suspicious PowerShell arguments, what the encoded arguments are, as well as a decode of the output, and understanding that, hey, this is now trying to install a hoax shell on this endpoint, and it's time to respond by either calling the customer admin or potentially running a host isolation on the machine and taking it off the network and submitting a ticket to that customer's IT of your machine got popped. Well, let's imagine that this adversary did not get tripped here or is just moving ultra fast before that host isolation kicks in. What do they do next? Privilege escalation. And we do see this in the real world. And again, this does not require being the super duper hacker and keeping up on all the latest and greatest vulns to be able to pop the privilege escalation systems without having admin passwords. What we're going to use here is something called Powershell Empire, which, if you are as lazy as I am, not only can you just grab as a module to install on your Kali Linux VM, but you can also get a really pretty front end for it called Starkiller. It's a really nice GUI, and if you just like having GUIs that look a lot like, say, a remote monitoring and management system, that's definitely out there and easy to use. So let's go ahead and use our hoax shell to invoke a web request to download Powershell Empire, which gives us all of these PowerShell tools. And, just to be extra sneaky, let's just call it launcher.exe. So if somebody's just, an IT person looking at a process map, they see that, oh, launcher sounds legitimate, no problem. From there, okay, we've got it downloaded, we start running it, and on our Kali Linux box, we can now see in the GUI, oh, hey, we've got that new agent checking in a few seconds ago. There it is. Now, if we go back to the other window that we've got, and we start running Powershell Empire, we can see a bunch of information coming from that session. And then when we run it, it takes a second, but basically we get this very user-friendly, novice-friendly screen that shows us what vulnerabilities are detected on the system, and helpful hints on how to best compromise it. If you can read that teal script, it says, oh, this is great. User is part of a local group that gets admin privileges. You should run the bypass UAC attack to escalate your privileges. So I don't even have to be a creative hacker. I just get these helpful hints, and I'm able to go to town. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and run that. And you can see down below there's even an autocomplete for helping me type the command out. Don't have to be a shell ninja here. And once I do, back on my nice GUI, you can see just over where the cursor is that we now have a little admin icon next to that session. And when we hover over, it says elevated process. Well, yeah. And now that we have an elevated process, we can have full control of the system. We can start browsing around for data. We can do it through the GUI or through a terminal shell. We can start tasking the machine, interacting with it, whatever the heck we want. We are admins, and we are off to the races. On the analyst side, we definitely get that detection of, hey, one of these privilege escalations things has run on there. And there's a number of them out there. Some of them are binaries, like I showed in the first window. A number of them are just PowerShell scripts that work through breaking into Windows through vulns that are out there. But either way, there's a question of going to the admins and getting that privilege and detecting it through the process or through the binary. You know, as I'm scrolling through, I see a question from Nathan that they get a lot of false positives for privilege escalations. How do you determine what is and is not legitimate? And really, that's a great question. And this is where well-trained humans that are able to see, hey, before this privilege escalation, what took place and what happened afterwards, and being able to use the MDR from our or the capabilities of our agents to also check on what else is happening on the machine and put it all into context. Great question, Nathan. So let's move forward in terms of what else happens in the real world and what other context do we get. Well, one of the most, and I'll bleep out my four-letter words here, let's call it messed up attacks that we witness. And this is something that sounds a little too computer science-y, but is now user-friendly and doable in the real world, are these memory dump programs. And what do they do? They basically are now that you have escalated privileges, allow you to pull credentials out of memory and make them available to the bad actors. So this is where I don't have a demo, but I do have something showing that we have the full access going into a dump and then where that would be detected. And kind of the last thing moving forward is defensivation. And this is where the attacker is now going, okay, how do I maintain access to the system and keep going? And when we look at this in the real world through Process Insights logs, we see this backstab type activity happening all the time. I think you just heard from our friends from Sophos before I came on. I can see that the bad actors go after them and a bunch of other security tools. As a proud product manager, I'm proud to say that the bad actors now know of us and are also trying to kill our processes. But really, the reason that I bring this up is defensivation is super duper common, but it is noisy, it is blatant, it is blood in the water and hard to ignore. And on that question of how do we, detect privilege escalation, et cetera, if something looks like a privilege escalation and then defense evasion maneuvers took place afterwards, by golly, you've got yourself an active attack going on, and there's time to respond, but response needs to take place. So let's put it all together, and let's see what happens when we see real-world attacks taking place. This is in reverse chronological order, so from the bottom up, much like you would see in other log formats. We oftentimes will see this kind of thing happen in rapid succession, where first there's an identification of user accounts, potentially reverse shell or cobalt strike running on the machine, credential theft, account recon, looking around the network, credential theft, and actually something that I did not talk about was also killing backup solutions. Because remember, if their goal is to make a profit off of ransomware, as opposed to business compromise or other lateral movement. You want to make sure there's not much in the way of backups available. So with that, I'm going to show you kind of what we're doing on the real world back end of the screen. We do have all of these different detection mechanisms, and interestingly enough, footholds are still more than half, just a little bit over half of the detections that we're seeing out there. Of the remainder processes that are running on the system, that earlier part of the attack is about half of what remains. And then, standard AV detections trigger lots of investigations where we know that they're canaries in the coal mine, but not necessarily the full vulnerability that's been detected, and the machine has not necessarily been made safe. And lastly, watching for file changes using ransomware canaries for encryptions in progress. That rarely happens, but it does. And really the output of this is a nice ticket like this that explains what happens. And if it's as simple as just needing a remediation plan, this is where our analysts do the heavy lifting and provide your team with outputs that say, hey, here's the steps that need to be taken for making the system safe again and cleaning it up. In most cases, there's even an option to just task our agents do this automatically. Although if your team prefers, let's say you do have folks who want to do this themselves, we list out those steps so they don't have to do a whole lot of digging and they can do it themselves. They can reject our remediation plan and say, thanks for the hints, guys, I got it from here. Either which way, this is keeping your users safe and a way to also make sure that your staff focuses on the important things, on the business enablers, not on squashing these issues. So what can Managed EDR do for you? Like I said before, that proactive threat hunting, early detection, humans to investigate 24/7, host isolation, meaning keeping the machine off of all networking if a critical incident is taking place, and it can provide clear remediation instructions, if not auto runs. And sorry, I saw a question from Sean earlier. Does Microsoft have any tools of service that helps with threat detection? Well, one of the things that we use is for managed AV. We actually use that built-in Defender, and we pull all those detections and then have humans keep an eye on it and respond, and just use that as one indicator. If it did its thing and we verify that it's success, great. If not, then that's where those humans get to escalate and get to do more digging. So with that, would love to just do a quick poll and to see if anybody is interested in scheduling demo with our team to learn more. And while y'all are doing that, also want to put out that, and I'll have it on the next slide, but I'm getting poll data back, that we do offer a 21-day free trial. This is with humans doing proactive threat hunting on an unlimited number of endpoints, with the ability for us to remediate all the stuff that got missed by other solutions that you might have on your systems, and custom incident response from our threat ops team. So with that, let's open up the conversation for any questions we might have.
Okay, super. Yeah, great presentation, Dima, and I appreciate the screenshotted demo as well. Definitely better to watch that than a bunch of download percentage bars. So I know Henry's been addressing some of the questions in the background while you've been talking, so appreciate that, Henry. And I'm also going to put up another poll here just about additional information people would like from Huntress Labs. And that personal demo slide wasn't up very long. You can also select that on here if you'd like it. No. So we do have some more questions, Dima. One of them is they're asking, why is Huntress different from other EDR tools that are out in the market?
Thanks for asking, and I really think that human element of having the managed piece is the biggest differentiator out there. And not only that, but having folks who are smart and well-trained and are able to look at the picture as a whole and respond so that your team doesn't have to do all of that sifting.
Gotcha.
So that's
awesome.
our biggest differentiator.
Okay. There's a question here from, let's see, from Nathan, who's asking, is there a recovery stage at the end if something were to be flagged as malicious? Or is it just making us aware that there's a threat and providing instructions on how to fix it? Mm-hmm. With the restoration process then falling into Nathan's hands or the customer's hands.
Yeah, great question. So we found that there's not a single profile of a customer, and that they oftentimes will want us to just resolve the issue for them, and other times they want to make sure their team is directly involved and is working through that response on their own. So what we provide is what we call assisted remediation. If you want to just say, hey, Huntress, you guys do it, you click approve the plan and it gets executed. If, for example, something doesn't necessarily go right, you're watching the assisted remediation take place and you're able to respond to that as well. In other cases, customers can set a preference for, hey, tell me what those remediation steps are following the incident, but I want to do it myself. I don't necessarily, or my security policy is that that our team addresses it directly, as opposed to it works through the assist systems. So the answer is, like, yes, we absolutely can and will do that. If we're seeing a critical incident, then we're not going to wait. We're going to take the system and isolate that host so that we prevent lateral movement or further damage from taking place. But in other cases, the answer is depends on what you want.
Okay, super. Hey, we've got another question here that's really interesting. They're saying, I have a 24/7 SOC. Does that mean that Huntress is not the right fit?
It depends on how luxurious these. First of all, congratulations on getting the budget for a 24/7 SOC, because usually, assuming those people on the 24/7 SOC get to take vacation, occasionally get sick, and go, and get a full 8 hours of sleep, that's at least 20 people. And when you do have that team, which is fairly rare in below the enterprise, like large enterprise Fortune 500 level, you want them focused on the most important things, and you really want that 24/7 SOC to be doing the interesting work. And this is where we can supplement that team and make sure that we're squashing the noise, and really giving them the most actionable insights and helping them do their best. And we do have customers that have 24/7 SOCs, and it's great because it means we can constantly chat with them and help them out.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, Dima, unfortunately, that's all the time we've got today. But thank you so much for coming on, for the presentation, for the demo, and for all your insights in the Q&A along with Henry. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. Okay, and it is time for our next prize drawing. And the winner of this one, this $500 Amazon gift card, is Bill Young from Georgia. So congratulations to Bill. We'll be in touch about claiming your prize. And now it is time for our final presentation in the Endpoint Management Protection Tools EcoCast. And our next session comes from CyberArk, and presenting for CyberArk is Andre, Senior Product Marketing Manager at Endpoint. Andre, welcome.
Thanks so much. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for your time and your interest in the topic. My name is Andre Pezhogin. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at CyberArk. I'm going to talk about implementing foundational endpoint security controls and how they are a cornerstone to endpoint security, because cyber attackers love them, some of your administrative privileges. So this whole presentation is about the idea that is kind of get dismissed a lot as common sense, but at the same time, this basic idea is way too often not get acted upon. And the idea is that to be successful in securing your organizations, we must need unprivilege the attacker. There's only one takeaway from the session. We'd like it to be that the key foundational endpoint security and identity security controls are critical for security, but are often missing. And what we mean by foundational endpoint security are least privilege, application control, credential theft protection, and protection from ransomware. These alone can give you a very high level of protection against targeted attacks, data breaches, and ransomware. We've tested this technology stack in our lab on over 3 million samples of ransomware, and according to our own tests, this technology were 100% effective against this sample. So the privilege impact on the area of attack is tremendous. According to our internal tests, again, more than half of the Windows vulnerabilities in 2020 would not be exploitable from the get-go if they just attempted as standard user. The impact of privilege on the organization security depends on how you choose to approach it. You can pretend that there's nothing you can do, or like play ostrich, or you may choose to actively manage privilege. You've got to acknowledge the prevalence of privilege and also your dependence on it, but also that the attacker is dependent on privilege. What we do is we help organizations to remove local admin rights and maintain the least privilege. And maintaining part is very important because we often see organizations that were able to briefly achieve the least privilege using GPOs or scripts, but then gradually return to privilege sprawl and privilege creep. We provide the right management tools and also policy audit capabilities, and with that we ensure that the least privilege remains the active state at the organization IT. So when defending against cyber threats, it's a good idea to focus and keep ransomware in mind. It's simply because ransomware seemingly exploits every vulnerability out there and delivers a very strong and lasting impact. If you apply the MITRE ATT&CK framework, the difference between ransomware and any other type of attack is only the very last stages of the attack, the impact and sometimes exfiltration if it's double extortion. So the rest of the strategies are basically the same. How the attacker gets into your infrastructure, how they move laterally, how they compromise more credentials, it is all the same. So while you focus on ransomware, you also want to keep in mind, and if you are able to prevent the attack at the early stage, then the attack never even gets to these last stages of the exfiltration and impact. With foundational endpoint security controls, you are able to diffuse a lot, if not the most, of techniques, tactics, and procedures that attackers use, and this way you essentially dry out their arsenal of tricks. With least privilege, you complement traditional endpoint security controls, and you also defend them from privileged attackers. It's very important you allow for early detection, but in the context of identity access and privilege. And that's a different kind of detection compared to, let's say, EDR. So I've just talked about tampering with traditional endpoint security controls, but is that a thing at all? Unfortunately, it is, and again, so you've seen the previous presentation, and I saw in the demo there is unloading of backup agents, there is tampering with logs. So that's the real world stuff, and also MITRE ATT&CK reflects this by listing quite a lot of defense interference techniques, TTPs. I got some of them here on the slide, but there are many more listed out there. And that again has tremendous impact on the on how attack unfolds and how fast it gets detected. So, for example, if you look at Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report 2021, you'll see that attacks that involve privilege misuse are undetected for months and years, while on average it takes only hours and days. So again, coming back to the notion of the foundational endpoint security controls, because traditional endpoint security needs our help to shine. So now for real myth that's out there. And that myth is that the attackers don't have privileges. In reality, they do, and if they don't, that would be their very first action to actually get privilege, and they are usually very successful with it. As we like to say, unprivileged attacker is just a privileged attacker, but with extra steps. That's why we really shoot for defense in depth, or simply comprehensive multi-layer protection. You might hear this a lot, but we truly believe in this concept, and we don't believe that any single solution is able to solve all the problems. We don't believe there's a silver bullet. We really believe that every security tool does what it's designed to do best, and you have to have a pretty balanced technology stack. So EDR, for example, records everything that allows for automated response and investigation, while Endpoint Privilege Manager, or EPM, that's the solution that we offer, it really defends against the attacker abusing privileges and compromising credentials. So just look at this quote on the slide. That's from SolarWinds Senate hearing last year, I believe. There was a question from Senator, why did EDR fail to alert about a breach for 11 days? And the answer was, I kid you not. Well, once you have admin access on a particular system, you are shutting it down, and you can pretty much do anything as an administrator that you want to do on the system. There's also a cost component that we should consider. And as you know, one of the ways organizations take on risk is to obtain cyber insurance policy that will allow them to kind of mitigate the impact of a successful data breach. But this field was very fluid over the years. And if back in 2014, I believe, when Target was breached, that was one of the first users of cyber insurance, and that depleted the cyber insurance payout pretty fast. So these days, cyber insurance companies will actually, make sure that you are well prepared to get their policy. So if you can renew this policy at all, they will have a lot of, checkboxes for you to tick, and certain capabilities are required for underwriting, including MFA, PAM, Endpoint Privilege Manager, or EPM, and others. Otherwise, you might be facing a non-renewal or astronomical premium hikes. So another thought is being compliant isn't very straightforward, right? So, for example, requirements of MFA for shared accounts. But how are you going to approach this if the account is shared? You are MFAing a person, not an account. So you have to have, again, a combination of tools to use PAM to tie a specific person to the specific accounts, and then you can MFA that admin, and you can enforce least privilege for that particular admin on the server. Finally, we'd like to explore Endpoint Privilege Manager in more details. So remember that EPM works with already authenticated user. That's like, think about like coming into an office where you have to, swipe the card at the entrance. And once you go through those doors, you're suddenly inside the organization. So that's where EPM steps in and makes sure that, let's say, people from marketing like myself don't have access to server room or don't have access to HR room where they store personal employee files and the information that I shouldn't have access to, right? So that's what EPM does. it manages least privilege on the endpoint once the user is already authenticated. So essentially, this is the last line of privilege defense. Now that the user is authenticated, we still want to flexibly define what they can and what they cannot do. And this, of course, should be different for different organizations and most importantly, different roles. System admins are different from marketing people, different from developers, and different from HR or finance. We can define what's safe, and we can control impact from malicious actions through the combination of least privilege, application control. There's just-in-time technologies for server maintenance teams. There are technologies that help with credential defense, so you can protect credentials that are stored in the browser. This is, one of the most important things today. The credentials stored in the browser. Third-party tools such as access tools, remote access tools, and operating system credential stores. Obviously, protection from ransomware. And one thing I would like to highlight is privilege deception. So one of the recent breaches, the ride-sharing company was breached, and the attacker went after a script that was on the network share. And that script actually had a hard-coded credential in there that they used to further access and disable security tools. Think about this. If this hard-coded credential was actually a privilege deception credential or privilege lure, this way we would get early enough alert to actually be able to tell that there's ongoing attack and to go into response mode and be able to prevent the impact that was delivered by the attacker just because they went undetected. Note that ransomware policy that we have built into EPM is quite different from what you see in endpoint protection platforms or endpoint detection and response. It focuses on the data. So while EPP or EDR, it actually analyzes every executable or process out there and tries to make the verdict if that's a malicious process or not. And they take a decision to either shoot it down or allow access. EPM doesn't do that. EPM basically doesn't spend any time on the verdict, but instead it builds this fence around the sensitive data, and only approved content handlers now can reach out and use this data. So we are not reliant on the verdict at all. We are not talking about cutting edge AI technologies or heuristics or behavioral protection. None of that. Only approved tools can touch data, and that's a great complementary layer of defense to that of EDR or EPP, whatever you use. So that also helps with the double extortion. Like if you cannot touch data, you obviously cannot encrypt it, but you cannot also take it away. You cannot exfiltrate, and then you cannot blackmail the organization into paying the ransom. So what's next? We would like to invite you to yet another webinar that we will present on November 2nd. I have here a link on the slide for you to register. If you'd like, we'll talk about how to streamline and speed up the deployment to start getting value from the implementation right away. So we would also be absolutely happy to schedule a demo for you, or even better, POC if you'd like. Or you can play with the solution on your own. I also have a link here for you for free EPM trial that you can use. The solution is fully SaaS, so you create an account and you can start deploying agents on your test machines right away. It's really straightforward and quick. We do have a lot of resources to assist you in this journey too, but just know this: if you sign up for the free trial and you need help with anything, just please reach out to us and we'll be happy to assist you with that. So Huge thanks for your time. I really appreciate it. We'll be happy to continue this conversation and have have a great rest of your day.
Okay, thanks, Christopher. And are you ready for a few questions?
Yes, that's by the way, Andre.
I'm sorry, Andre.
No worries.
I was looking at somebody's questions in the questions panel, and I apologize. So that was a great discussion, Andre. And well, we do see what questions we have here. I'll just put up the poll question, and we appreciate your answers on what additional information you'd like from CyberArk, and also Andre did mention the free trial and the personal demo. There's also the option there to click on a personal demo, and also would like to try for myself is another place if you missed any of those links. Yeah, so Andre, let me ask Christopher's question, which is what are the reporting features of the EPM?
Yeah, so we have a pretty flexible reporting engine, which really provides good visibility over the privilege aspect on the endpoint. In the endpoint, there's a pretty impressive number of pre-built reports that you can use right away. So, for example, you might want to run a report on all the administrative accounts on the endpoint. But also they are very customizable. You can get them, in different formats. You can build them right in console, or you can download them. You can set up, email cadence for reports, and you can also use API to go and fetch reports programmatically. Again, high level of customization is there for you. So it depends on what you need. But I'm pretty sure, like any slice of information you might need is achievable with the reports and the API.
Okay, super, very nice. Next question here: Does Endpoint Privilege Manager support any other platforms than Windows, and does it support servers?
Yeah, absolutely. I should have mentioned that. Obviously, we old-fashioned in terms of how we define endpoint. That's pretty much any machine that is connected to network. So that's workstation, that's server, that's physical, that's co-location, virtual, persistent, non-persistent, public cloud. That doesn't really matter to us. We think that every asset that you have connected to the network should be protected. And again, because there's a multitude of platforms, so a lot of companies, an increasing number of companies use Mac for workstations, but also increasing number of companies move their servers to the cloud where Linux is the most dominant system. We do support all of them. Quite a few flavors of Linux, Mac OS, and obviously Windows and Windows Server.
Okay, super. Yeah, in sticking sort of with that Windows Server idea, they're wondering, how is your solution different from what I can do with GPO to remove local admin? Right.
So quite a few companies, particularly in the SMB space, do use GPO to just pull local admin privileges from the accounts. The problem there is that, and I think I mentioned this, is that it's hard to maintain the status quo, right? Adminless status quo. There are things that you need to be doing, and the environment changes. There are things that get newly introduced and need to be you as admin and you as user. Imagine a developer, right? You need to be using new tools, and the environment should remain flexible. So with GPO, you really lose that flexibility and ability to respond to that change. But with the right tool and with the policy-based tool, you maintain this ability to prevent privilege creep, privilege sprawl, and you're able to actually maintain, not just achieve the adminless environment, but maintain that as time goes, and to be able to, come to that audit and pass this audit every time. But also when something new needs to be done, you have tools at your disposal to respond to the change.
Gotcha. Excellent. I like that. Yeah, and so you mentioned audits there, and that leads into another question that we have here. They're asking, do you have customers who went through an audit to achieve compliance with your solution?
Oh yeah! Oh my God! if not every second customer. We had I think an outstanding case just recently where the customer had to go through audit by a certain date, and we started working with them like a week before, and obviously there needed to be like all the documentation put in place before they could deploy in the environment, in production environment. But in a week, they got the whole thing up and running, and they successfully passed audit. And I love that case because that just showed how easy it is to deploy and use that being a SaaS solution with predefined out-of-the-box configurations. Basically, you just press a few buttons and you're ready to go.
Yeah, no, that's a great turnaround time. It's a great story. Well, Andrei, it looks like we're running out of time, but just one last time here. If somebody wants to get started with CyberArk or find out more, what do you recommend? Yeah,
so we've put a couple of resources, links on the slide, and a couple of resources in the resource box here. Obviously, there's Product Web is there for you, cyberark.com/EPM. And again, as I said, if you need any help at any step of your journey, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and let's keep in touch, and let's have that conversation.
Okay. All right. Super. Well, great presentation today, and thank you so much for educating us on CyberArk.
Thanks for having me.
All right, and now it is time for our final prize drawing of the day, believe it or not. So the winner of the last $500 Amazon gift card is Anne-Marie Kirchner from California. So congratulations to Anne-Marie, as well as earlier winners Marcus Moran and Bill Young. We'll be in touch about claiming your prizes. If you were watching the event today and thinking that this type of event would be the ideal platform to tell folks about your platform or solution, we would love to hear from you to help you determine which of our hundreds of events each year would be a good fit for you. Contact us at connect@actualtechmedia.com. And ransomware came up quite a few times today over many of the presentations. We've got a lot more of the information that you need about ransomware on our website, ransomware.org. But we've also got an event coming up tomorrow, which I mentioned earlier, with ransomware expert Alan Liska, called Ransomware D-Day. Every minute counts when the org is hit. It's one of our expert series sessions. I've just been looking over Alan's slides this morning, and it's looking really good. So if ransomware is a concern for you, you don't want to miss this one. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank all of our presenters today for putting together such great presentations and demos, and for all of their insights in the Q&A. I also want to thank all of our participants for making this event possible: Sophos, Huntress Labs, and CyberArk. And last but not least, we'd like to thank all of you for attending today's EcoCast from Actual Tech Media and for all of your great questions. That concludes today's event. Have a really good rest of your day.